Defendingyhwh. Let me start off by saying that I'm very grateful that it's you and it's not me defending the Watchtower statements in this brochure, because as far as I can see, they've put you in an impossible position. And I don't think that you really fully understand the predicament that this publication has put you in as an apologist. And I can only assume from the content of your response to me that you didn't really quite understand the points that I was trying to make. But to give you the benefit of the doubt, I'm going to assume that you're not at fault for that, but I am for not making my position clear enough for you in the first two videos that I made. So let me try again. And this time let me preface my comments by saying that I've spent years studying Watchtower publications, and through this study I've noticed a peculiar method that the Watchtower writers use when defending a, let's just say, difficult doctrine or position. And I call this method the Illusional Apologetic. The reason that I call it the Illusional Apologetic is because I believe that the Watchtower teaches many things that they know aren't true, and they know that they don't have facts to back up what they're teaching. And since they don't have the facts, the best that they can do is to create the illusion that it's true. And I think that much of their writing is geared towards creating and sustaining that illusion. And let me give you an example, and I'll do it on another topic first, and then I'll show you how they do virtually the same thing in the Trinity brochure. Now, at a certain point in time, the Watchtower decided to place a great deal of emphasis on the organization itself. And as they were doing this, they must have thought somehow that, well, we need to try to prove that God uses an organization, or why would the organization even be important? So the Watchtower writers kind of got out their smoke and their mirrors, and they began to write articles about how God has always had and always used an organization from the time of Abel to modern day, and you must be a part of this organization because God has always used an organization. Now, of course, the problem with this position, this illusion that they've carefully crafted, is the same problem that every other illusion has. If you wait for the smoke to clear and you look past the mirrors, there's not an ounce of actual substance. It's nothing but deception. In this instance, what happens when you remove the mirrors is you find nothing. You find nothing because there is nothing. You can assemble an army of researchers and you'll never be able to find this supposed organization. Think about it. Where was God's organization headquartered in 1750? Where was the governing body in 1610? Where was the organization in 1180? Who was a member of this organization in 720? And so on and so on. You can search history and you won't find this organization until the late 1800s. You won't find it because it's a fantasy. It's an illusion created by the Watchtower. Now, to make matters worse, the Watchtower illusions always sting twice. What happens when the smoke clears? Well, let's just say that the Jehovah's Witnesses were right and God has always had an organization. Let's say that God had an organization in the 1800s. Well, even if they're right, that's still a huge problem because Russell didn't join an organization. He started one. And if God had an organization at the time that Russell started his organization, that just simply means that he rejected God's organization. And there are many organizations that can be God's organization, just not the Watchtower. And that's the problem with so many of these Watchtower illusional apologetics, is that even when you're right, you're still wrong and you still lose. Now, back to the issue at hand and the challenge that I actually gave you. The Watchtower in this magazine is quite simply using just another illusional apologetic. The statements by the Watchtower writers on page 7 about how the Trinity was unknown throughout biblical times and for several centuries thereafter, while I appreciate your creativity in trying to force the word thus to mean something that it simply doesn't mean, you're still in error. The word thus in this context simply means that the thought about to be expressed is based upon previous information. It does not mean that it's the exact same thought from the previous paragraph. And this is actually easily proven. For instance, Lamson's timeline is from the birth of Christ plus 3 centuries. That's approximately 300 CE. The Watchtower's timeline is different. It's biblical times plus 3 centuries. That's a difference of about 100 years, and it proves that the Watchtower writer was not simply parroting what Lamson had said. This was an independent thought, and the Watchtower writer actually upped the ante and added 100 years. And of course, it's completely unsustainable to say that the Trinity was unknown during that period. Now, the other difference between Lamson's comment and the Watchtower summary is when Lamson says that the Trinity was unknown, he adds a qualifier and he says the modern popular doctrine of the Trinity was unknown. Now, once again, the Watchtower writer, in order to create the illusion, removes that qualifier and simply says that the Trinity was unknown during this time period. You can define thus, I guess, however you want to, but you can never get around the fact that that's just what the writer said. I'm not arguing with Lamson, I'm arguing with what the Watchtower said. So there's the illusion that the Trinity was unknown during this time period. Now, of course, it's laughable when you look at known history. I don't even have to prove that any of the church fathers believed in the Trinity. All I have to prove is that they knew about the Trinity, or they knew of the Trinity, or they knew something about the Trinity. Now, as I was talking about before, here's the second sting that comes from using one of these illusional apologetics that the Watchtower likes to use. Let's pretend that I just throw in the towel and I say, you know what, you're right. The early church knew nothing of the Trinity. Just like the example that I gave before, you still lose. Because the only point that you can be attempting to make here is that if the early church didn't believe in the Trinity, it must not be true. You should reject it. Well, as I asked in the other video, I'll ask you once again and see if you're willing to answer this. Where is most of the modern doctrine of the Watchtower in the early church? Where do I find the invisible coming of Christ in 1914? Where do I find a special heavenly class and a secondary earthly class? Where do I find so many of the Watchtower doctrines in the early church? If your premise is, and what the clear premise of the Watchtower article is that if it can't be found in history, you shouldn't believe it, then I have no reason to believe anything that the Watchtower says either, and I certainly wouldn't want to come to be a Jehovah's Witness based on that. See, the problem with this, and why I think it's an impossible debate for you, is because even if you're to win the argument, you still damage the Watchtower's credibility. If I'm to reject what I believe based on this, then you have to reject the Watchtower, because you can't find most of the Watchtower teachings in the writings of the early church fathers either. It's a self-refuting argument, and even if you win, you lose. So it's my hope that this video helps clarify what I was saying in the other videos, because I really don't think that you understood that the arguments that I was making, or you just quite simply evaded them. I guess that could be true too, but I'll give you the benefit of the doubt on that. So that's my position, and that's my argument, and I look forward to your response. And in a couple of days, I'm also going to make a video response concerning the origin issue you were discussing in your video. So until then, be well.